Start. We're 30 minutes, late on the whole program. This area here is more or less the Quarkus track. So we have 4 Quarkus talk. This is the first one for today. And my name is Dimitris Andreadis. I'm engineering director at Red Hat. And for this talk, I have with me Giorgos Andrianakis. Say hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm a principal engineer at Red Hat, working on Quarkus under Dimitris' team.
Yes, and for this session today, we'll try to keep it short and sweet. So I'll make let's say, a quick introduction, not too many slides, maybe 10 minutes. George will take over and we'll show you how Quarkus looks like, so you get a feeling. Before coming here, we ran a poll just to see, how much people know Quarkus. So let's repeat it here. So, is this your first ever talk on Quarkus? Just raise your hand. Okay.
Most people I say. Yeah.
If you've seen Quarkus before, raise your hand also. Is anyone using Quarkus in production? We have a winner. Yeah, we have lots of t-shirts as well, and you can take later, in the break and stuff. So okay, let me start it. I have my clicker here. We introduced Quarkus to Voxxed Athens 3 years ago. So that was a, let's say, inaugurating talk for Quarkus. Quarkus was at version 0.18 back then. And since then, a lot of things happened. So we've been very busy. We've put out tons of releases. We release Quarkus every month now. We used to release every week, more or less. New features, bug fixes come all the time. We have many extensions. Extension is the way for Quarkus to use a library or a framework. So now we have quite many. We have over 500. So chances are, whatever you want to do, you will find an extension that will do the trick for you. We have more than 700 contributors that participate in the Quarkus project, which is absolutely great. And lots of GitHub stars. So what is Quarkus? Is a framework of frameworks. Is a network stack to let you write cloud-native applications. So think about containerized applications that will run on Kubernetes, either as microservices or serverless. But you can use Quarkus for other stuff as well, but this is the major use case. And Quarkus for us was the answer to this question: what's the best way to write cloud-native applications in Java? There are some more seats here.
There are a few seats here. I can see like 4 or 5 seats.
Yeah, or just sit down. We're a big family here. The problem we try to solve is when you deploy in the cloud, the size matters. So you want to create the smallest possible application for the given memory and CPU. So as to, of course, reduce your bill, be more environmentally friendly if you care about CO2 emissions and all this stuff. So we try to miniaturize things. And in this process, you'll find out that traditional frameworks suffer from the same problem. Basically, they load too many classes, they are very dynamic, they perform a lot of initialization. So imagine you write your typical Spring Boot app, you say, okay, I write my hello world, and you end up importing the universe very quickly, and then it becomes big and bloated. And why this happens? Because the typical library will do something like this. You compile your application, and then all the libraries will do some sort of initialization, will read configuration files, will parse XML files, they will try to find out the configuration. Then many frameworks do class path scanning. You have annotations in your code, so they have to scan all the code, load the classes, find out what is it that you want to do, and then build some sort of model in memory that represents your application. And only then they are able to actually start doing something useful. So create the final, objects and run them and start processing. multiply this by many libraries you use it, and you get the idea how expensive this can be. So the basic idea behind Quarkus, and the one thing to remember after you go away, after our full track today, well,
After a full day, yeah.
you'll be indoctrinated. It's this. What Quarkus does is it reverses this problem. So it says, what if I do most of these things when I compile my application, not when I run it? What if I can perform this initialization, create the objects, create something, and in my executable, I write this thing, I write the result. The result to this question, how I configure my application. Then this means that I can create a smaller application, I can put less code to run, and this code will run as many times I start my application. So I won't pay the price every time my application starts if I have many instances, scaling up, scaling down. So that's the basic idea behind Quarkus. And what we do is essentially we put less code in your app, and that creates an optimized Java application. So people initially confuse Quarkus. They say, oh, is this thing that does allow you to do native builds with Graal, etc.
You don't know how many times I've heard that.
But really, Quarkus optimizes the Java case primarily, all right? And then, starting from that point, if you go the extra step, and for Quarkus, the extra step, if you want to compile to native code, is very simple. You just compile with a different flag, and magically you will get a native executable. Then the next phase becomes even more optimized, because you start from an optimized Java image, and then you produce an even more optimized native executable. And this is very hard to beat unless you do it the Quarkus way, which is how we do it, and we will show you later. So in practical terms, what does that mean? When you convert a traditional, let's say, application to Quarkus, you'd expect the memory requirements to go like half. If you needed 1 gigabyte before, Quarkus will happily run with 500 megabytes.
We should just add here that RSS here in this slide means resident set size, which is like probably the best approximation for knowing how much full memory your JVM application consumes, right?
Yeah. At runtime.
Yes, at runtime.
Excellent. Yes. And then it usually starts 5 times faster. So if before it took 5 seconds to start, now it will take 1, which is quite significant. And then if you go the extra step and you do, the native build, then things go crazy, 50 times faster times. Normally we're talking about milliseconds, and memory requirements drop down to about a fifth. And there are different heuristics to say, okay, what should I do? Should I stick with Java, go native? It depends on your application. Many people are happy to stay in the Java space. They know the tooling, they know how to debug. It's totally fine. Others we're gonna go smaller. So for example, if you write lambdas or stuff like that, native really makes sense there. And with this very fast intro, I'll give it over to George. He will show you some of the stuff. We'll try to fit in as many as we can in the next 30 minutes of how Quarkus actually feels, because I think you have to see it to believe. So George, take it away.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, we're going to try to demo some various features of Quarkus, and Dimitris will comment along the way, so I don't forget anything. So, okay, initially, let's say, the starting experience for people who want to develop a Quarkus application is they would go to code.quarkus.io, right? So, if you're familiar with...
Do we have internet?
I should.
All right.
I'll make this a little bigger. Yeah, I'm trying, but there we go. Okay, so Code Quarkus.io is very similar. If you have used Spring Boot and you know, like start Spring.io, this is very, very similar. It lets you bootstrap a project, Gradle, Maven, whatever. In here you get to pick any set of extensions. So if you want to do like Hibernate, you would write Hibernate here, and there's a bunch of stuff that pops up as proposals. We'll use a few of these. And you don't have to use code.quarkus.io to bootstrap an application. We also have command line tooling that will do it, which basically looks something like
bigger, George, bigger.
Yeah, create app. Now here, this is going to be.
Yeah, while George tries this, Quarkus is very much Maven driven. So it's like Maven plugins. So you can stick with Maven. You don't have to use the website or anything like that. You can use a CLI. We have a specialized CLI that is more friendly. You have to write less stuff. Yeah. You can use Gradle as well. So there are multiple options to start with Quarkus.
Okay, so this is the font here, custom font. I should be using Mac for all this, but I never got around to learning Mac. Okay, so if you want to create like the Quarkus application via the CLI, all you have to do is download the Quarkus CLI, which you can do from like SDK Man or any of the various channels like the Chocolattery, whatever the Windows thing is called. So basically what you would do is just execute Quarkus.create app, you would give it a name, and you would say which extensions you want. All this is described on our documentation. Obviously you don't need to remember this offhand, nobody does, I don't. But we're going to skip this step, and we're going to go straight to the application that we're going to actually use, right? So this is the application that I've already generated from the command line tooling, and we're calling it the to-do application. And basically what we want to do in the end is like come up with something like this, right? Make this little, basically it's a very, very simple to-do app, right? You just add entries in, you complete them, you delete them, whatever. So it's a very, very simple CRUD application. But we'll use it to explore the various features of Quarkus, right? And along the way, we'll see how you can be super productive while writing the application. So, like Dimitris said, normally when you would create like a traditional Spring Boot or whatever application, you do npm package and then you would run it, and you wouldn't get much support while you were like developing your application, right? But in Quarkus, we have this special mode, which is called the dev mode, right? And what that does is it enables you to very, very easily iterate on the code you are going to write. Now, a bunch of stuff happened here. We'll explain it later. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to refresh the application. Well, actually, I don't have any code written yet, right? All I did is just launch this special mode that will allow me to iterate on code very, very quickly.
So George just generated an application,
yes.
And this is the first time you go into it, right?
Yes, yes. Now, actually, I'm going to do that again because I wasn't using Java 17, and we would run into a problem later on. So let's do that again. So I generated the application, just started, right? This application contains the following extensions. So REST Easy React and Jackson. This is basically our JAX-RS layer, which also integrates with Jackson for JSON parsing. I have OpenAPI here so we can see what the Swagger UI will look like. Hibernate Validator, and we're using Hibernate RM. Everybody knows Hibernate RM, super easy way to access the database. So if I refresh here, I'm likely not going to see anything, right? Because I haven't written any code. All I have is a UI that is supposedly, it is making some REST calls, but I haven't implemented them anywhere, so nothing happens. So let's start out and write some code, right? So let's see what happens. So I'm going to add my entity, right? So everybody who's used Hibernate before, like who hasn't used Hibernate? Love it. Everybody's used Hibernate. Excellent. So if you use Hibernate, you know the entity annotation, but if you're new to Quarkus, what you have not seen before is this panache entity thing. What this panache entity thing does is that it allows you to use an active record style pattern to access CRUD functionality, right? So you don't have to write a repository to access the to-do entity. You can if you want to, but this will make it a lot easier, and it'll make it'll allow me to write code much faster. So I'm going to add a few fields here. I'm going to say name, a URL. I'm going to add a boolean that's called completed, and I'm going to add an int. It's an order, and I'm going to add some validation here. I'm going to say the minimum order is 0, and I'm going to map this to a column that's named ordering. I'll show you why I'm doing this. Okay, so I just wrote this, right? Nothing else. I haven't done anything. So let's try and expose all the to-do entities to a REST API. So I'm going to say to-do resource, right? So this is just your normal JAX-RS. Who has used JAX-RS in the past? Great. So who has used Spring MVC? The rest, okay. So for those of you who have not used JAX-RS, the idea is extremely similar to Spring MVC. You just have like different style annotations that pretty much do the same thing. So what I'm doing here is I'm exposing the to-do entity to a REST for a REST API. And I'm going to call it API because that's what the front end expects. Not too smart, but anyway. List all. And here comes the first bit of magic, right? So remember, my to-do extended what we said was the panache entity, right? And that panache entity gives me this method called list all. So I can immediately do various things in the database, which here what we want to do is we want to list all entities. I'm going to say this is going to be a get, and I'm pretty sure I don't need to do anything else. Now, watch me very, very closely, right? There's no magic that I'm performing here behind the scenes. I'm just refreshing, and it didn't work because we have not done something proper in this database here. So something blew up. We need to see what happened. Error insert into. Let's see. I have an import. I have a file that's called import SQL that Quarkus is using basically to import some values into the database, right? And I'm hoping that I have not made a mistake here, but I'm almost certainly have. So let's see what we call. Okay, column title in relation does not exist. Okay, so this name was title, right? Okay, this is awesome. So I made a mistake, obviously, we all do. But all I'm doing here with Quarkus is I'm fixing the mistake and I'm refreshing, right? So check this out. All I did was fix the mistake I did here. I refreshed the browser and everything just magically appeared, right? So you're probably wondering, okay, there's probably some serious magic, let's say, going on behind the scenes, right? So first of all, what database is being used? Second of all, where does this data come from? Am I running anything behind the scenes? Am I running like Postgres, anything like that? So
maybe you should say a few things. How dev mode works.
Exactly.
What does it do?
Exactly. So remember when we started the application, we ran mvm Quarkus dev, right? I didn't package it. I didn't run Java jar or anything. I ran this special dev mode. So what dev mode does, among other things, is that when it sees let's say a hibernated application, in this case, it starts a container behind the scenes, right? So if we go back to our POM.xml file, and we saw that we added a Postgres driver, right? And because I have not configured anything as a URL for the database here, right? I haven't configured any URL anywhere. Quarkus automatically knows that when I'm in this dev mode, which means that I'm actually actively developing my application, what I should do is that I should get a Postgres database already set up in order for me to focus on writing the actual code and not focus on like configuring, okay, where's my where's my Postgres database? Where's my, what's the URL for the database, right? What's all that stuff that, when you're actually writing an application, you don't want to care, right? That's the whole idea. You're not supposed to care.
And we call that dev services,
Exactly.
right?
So we call it dev services, and what I wanted to, it's not very visible here. If we go very, very far back in the logs, you would see that it said that it was starting a database. Like if you were watching very, very close, you would have seen it. But there is another way to see all this, to see behind the curtain, let's say, right? And that is what we call the Quarkus Dev UI, right? So the Dev UI is basically a, let's say, sort of like a management console for the Quarkus application that is running in dev mode, right? So this only is available in dev mode when you're running this Quarkus and this MVN dev. And among other things, right, let's see what we can see behind the scenes that Quarkus has done for us. Just by writing this two classes.
What
right?
are the blue boxes, George?
Yeah, excellent. So the blue box is basically, each blue box represents a Quarkus extension that is active in the application, okay? And each blue box gives you access to some of the features, gives you access to behind the scenes, what Quarkus is doing to implement the various functionality that the specific extension brings in. So ARC, for example, is the CDI implementation. And you can see here there's a bunch of links we can click to see behind the scenes, like what kind of beans Quarkus has registered for us, right? In this case, like, we're not going to go through that much. But for example, what is interesting is that, let's say we had a large application, right? A large Hibernate application. This gives me access to see all the entities in the application. And it also allows me to see what create and drop scripts Hibernate would have generated for us, which we can then use these to bootstrap a production application. But what's very interesting in this case is the dev services link here. So again, when I started the application, I didn't configure anything. I didn't configure a URL for the database. So Quarkus started a Postgres database Docker container for me. But let's say I really wanted to know like what it's doing, right? Well, I would open this and I would see that, okay, what Quarkus is doing is that it is running a container, the Postgres 14 container, and it's mapping ports 5432, which is the default Postgres container, Postgres port, to something local, right? The 49156. And then what it's doing also behind the scenes is that it's configuring these properties, which you would normally need to configure on your own. So let's say you started a container on your own, right? Docker run, whatever. Then you would need to take the username, the password, the URL, and configure Quarkus to use it. But Quarkus already does that automatically for you behind the scenes. So this is just a peek behind the scenes to see what Quarkus is doing. Obviously, this allows you to do much more than just visualize things. It also allows you to alter the state of, let's say, a database, right? You can reset the database, for example, if you want. Also, you have access to Swagger UI, so you can actually try out your application here. So if I wanted to hit the REST API that I developed, I could just use this Swagger UI instead of like the console or whatever.
So, George, just to recap, so
yeah.
dev mode starts the Quarkus, let's say, server in a special configuration with extra facilities that you don't get when you compile for production.
Exactly, yeah. So if we had to like summarize what it does, okay, basically it allows you to edit code and reload the Quarkus application on the fly. That's one. The second one is that it starts containers for you automatically depending on what extensions you are using. The third one that we're going to show right now is continuous testing, right?
I think you should say a few things more about the automatic reload. So, how this happens? You wrote code, you saved, you reload, and you immediately saw that.
So yeah, we saw here that I made a mistake. Like I loaded, nothing worked. I just changed it and it worked. How did that happen? Right. So in the Java space, like we've been made fun of by a lot of like Node folks, Python folks, that you guys, you don't have a live reload nothing works. And in Python, we've had this forever. So what Quarkus does basically is the folks that developed this feature had a very, very good understanding of how the internals of JVM work. So the by far most trouble-free way of implementing this this functionality is by using custom class loaders. Who here has written their own class loader? Nobody. Good. That's what I wanted to hear. Right? It's just too much of a hassle, and application developers should never have to do that. But what Quarkus does is that when it launches this special mode, it loads your code in its own class loader, right? So it's isolated from the rest of the code. And when I'm writing here, when I'm changing something here, and just simply refreshing the browser, what Quarkus is doing is that it's throwing away the old class loader with all your old code, and it's taking the code that it's compiled on the fly, because we also invoke the Java compiler or Kotlin compiler, and puts the output in the new class loader and just reloads that. And
all right, let me recap. You hit refresh, Quarkus freezes, look at the file system, sees the changes, recompiles the changes, stops the app, starts the app, and let it go through.
And all that happens in like 100
milliseconds. This happens in milliseconds, so you don't see it. It's still Java compiled code, but it just, looks like interpreted, I don't know, JavaScript.
Exactly.
And this is not like a quite trivial app. It has a database, it does some things.
Yeah, and like even if you scale this up, the reload time is again extremely fast. Okay, so I mentioned another feature that we have called continuous testing, but I'm not going to describe what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead first and say that okay, I wrote this code. Well, let's write some tests, right? You'll see down here that this says test pause. It says press R to resume testing. So the other thing you see down here is that this is an interactive console, right? You can do various things. We'll see some more, but for now, let's just press resume to test, right? So I'm starting the test, but no tests were found because, as you see in this folder here, there are no tests, right? So let's go ahead and write a test. So let's do create test. I'm going to say Quarkus test, void test all, test. Okay, and I'm going to use REST Assured. So REST Assured is a library for testing REST APIs. It has a ton of functionality. All I'm going to do here for now is I'm going to say when get API, then status code 200, and I'm going to say size because I want to make sure that I'm returning the proper number of results, which we saw from here is 4, right? So let's say is 4, and import this. Or matchers or something like that. Yeah, is. Okay, now, oh, sorry, yeah, the status code, this is wrong, body. Okay, so let's put this on the line so it's more visible. So now, you saw basically that Quarkus, while I was writing this, it tried to compile the test for me, right? But I made a mistake. And now it's supposedly correct, so let's see what's going on now. It's trying to run this test, and now you see that, like, without me doing anything, basically just switching from the editor to the console, the test ran, right? And you probably don't, you're thinking, I might be doing something excellent or something weird. Well, let's try this. I'll change the test to make it fail. I'll go back, and the test fails as I expected, right? So not only do we have what we saw earlier where we're live coding the actual application and things get reloaded when I test the browser, we also have the feature that I can write tests and those tests get rerun when I finish writing the application, right? So again, I'll go back here, make this, and everything just works, right?
Yeah. So George, the idea with Quarkus is you launch the IDE, you start Quarkus and then vote, and you
Well,
don't.
let me,
You don't leave the
if you're Giannis, you're not using an IDE.
Well, he's using the I or Emacs. Well, anyway, you can use whatever you want, but you don't leave your environment. You just stay there. If you want to add this new subsystem, can you add something like whatever? Just in the POM. You add something in the POM, it's downloaded. You don't leave the ID, you don't stop. So just go on and go on.
Exactly. So let's say I wanted to do some TDD, right? Well, actually, how much time do we have?
We have like 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
3 minutes for the demo.
Okay, so I'm all right, generous.
But there will be more demos because we have a workshop then, and we have a deep dive.
Okay, so I'm going to say,
And we have a session also that's like just a discussion. You can ask anything. We have like almost an hour to ask any question you may have about Quarkus. It's called the POF, the Birds of the Feather. Which is later on today. So that's why now we won't take questions. We have another 7 minutes to finish.
okay, so I'm basically just writing, I'm trying to add functionality in a TDD manner where I'm adding the test first and then I'm adding, I'm going to implement the actual code that implements it, right? So I want to say, okay, if I'm adding something, actually I'll need to say content type JSON, then I'm going to say status code 200, right? So I'm adding that test first. And I'm just going to the browser. Oh, right. I didn't post this to the post.
Something we didn't show at all is you can actually do some Spring APIs in Quarkus. We support about maybe 10 different APIs. George makes them.
Yeah, so there's a Spring Web, Spring Data APA, Spring Security, yeah, configuration, some things like that. Unfortunately, yeah, we don't have time to show here. So basically here I added a test in a TDD fashion that fails, right? So what this does is that it posts to to an endpoint and it takes it in order, and it just fails because we expected to get 200 as a result, but we got 404 because we didn't implement it. And if I go and say to do add transactional post to do, and then say to do persist, and say return to do, I'm hoping that my test will now pass. And let's see, it didn't yet. Run the test, it failed because, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what failed here. Let me see, if I do 201, it should fix the assertions failed, cool, yes. So okay, I see what happened. Yeah, I'm posting to the wrong API. So if I do this, then yes, okay. Let's order. Basically, yeah, it ran the test in the wrong order. So if I use JUnit's order annotation, it should work. But I don't see it actually. Oh, sorry, wrong. No, this isn't the test code. So if we go to the test code and say order 1 and order 2 and go test method order order annotation class, then now everything should work as expected, because what we wanted to do is assert the how many things we have before we enter the database, enter the new thing in the database, and we want to assert that this works. And I can also finish this off by writing one more that will say order 3 after add, and this should be 5, and let's see. Excellent. So you see how fast these tests are reloading, right? And there's another piece of magic here that you can't really see because the application is so small, but if the application were a lot larger, you had a ton of tests, you would see that Quarkus was only reloading the tests that that were affected by the functionality you have implemented in the application. So if you have like 50 resources here, 50 entities, and then you have like another 500 tests, when you change something in one entity, you would only see the Quarkus running the tests that are affected by that entity.
George, you did great. I think we have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Back to the slides.
Back to the slides. Yes.
Very quickly, just a few slides to recap. Slideshow.
Slideshow, yes.
That's it. All right. Recap. Why Quarkus? Well, Quarkus. People come to Quarkus for speed because it's very fast, very small, and stuff. But they normally stay for the other nice things like developer experience. You had some, taste of how it looks like for you. Something we didn't really mention, Quarkus has a lot of support for reactive stuff.
Yeah, we'll see that in the deep dive. So everybody should be at the deep dive.
Yeah, it's built on a reactive core based on Vertex, so you have options to do, blocking or non-blocking things. Big ecosystem of standards and APIs that we support. We're not dogmatic. We support whatever makes sense. And if something is missing, you can add it yourself. You can write an extension. And finally, new innovation coming from Quarkus in terms of new implementations, new APIs to address different scenarios. This is not exhaustive list, and this keeps going. Every month, something new comes with Quarkus. So, with that, want to learn more? We have another session. 2 p.m., 2:30 actually.
Yeah.
2:30. There's a workshop. You can use your own laptop if you're brave enough to try to follow through, or you can watch the guys, George and Ioannis. We have a discussion at 3:40, 3:50.
Yeah.
The three of us and Holly will be here from their team, so we can answer any question you have around Quarkus. We're here to discuss, and then finally a deep dive. If you're really into it, more technical stuff. Come at the last session. And with that, I think we're done tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.